Last week, Josh Allen, Rachaad White, Jamar Chase, Michael Pittman, Amari Cooper, and every tight end not named Brock Bowers or Trey McBride busted in fantasy football. This week, I'm going to bring you 5 players who could do the same. 5 guys that I am very nervous to start, that if you have a better option, you should look that way. Through 2 weeks doing this video, I have a hit rate of 70%. We have hit on 7 out of 10 players. Now, last week, we totally missed on Calvin Ridley. That's definitely unfortunate, but we hit on every other player. Definitely props to Calvin Ridley for doing his thing. This is a video that I don't want to make. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I don't want to make this video. This video instantly allows me to give you a chance to criticize me. But I want to, put my big boy pants on and say, I'm sorry guys, I don't like the starts this week. My hope is that you would watch this video, you would hear my rationale, and then make a decision for yourself if you believe what I believe. So the first player that I think could bust this week is J.K. Dobbins at the Pittsburgh Steelers. I know J.K. Dobbins has been so good. He has been the late round pick of the year thus far, top 5 running back through 2 weeks. He's been absolutely electric, so efficient, but now he faces the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers have given up the 5th fewest points per game to fantasy running backs this year. On average, they're only giving up 14 points to an entire running back room. And the Steelers defense in general is just really legit. They only give up 76.5 rushing yards per game. That's 4th fewest in the NFL. They're also giving up the 5th fewest total yards per game. They're giving up the 2nd fewest total offensive points scored per game. Guys, through 2 weeks, they're only giving up 8 points per game. That is scary to think about as a matchup. And they're only allowing opposing rushing offenses to average 3.7 yards per attempt. That is such a low number. This defense is so legit. I love J.K. Dobbins, but I'll be honest, guys, I'm a little bit concerned that this could be one of those weeks where he falls off. I would totally be open to shopping him right now. He's got a really tough schedule coming up. I would rather start names like Zach Moss, Brian Robinson, Rachaad White, Tony Pollard. I could be wrong. I get it, but I just don't like the start this week for Dobbins. Okay, with this next one, we are assuming that Jordan Love is out this week with this take. If Jordan Love is going to play, you can totally start some of the Packer wide receivers, okay? But assuming he is out, I do not want to play a single Packers wide receiver versus the Titans this week. Tennessee's secondary, their defense in general is just the definition of lockdown this year, guys. They give up the 3rd fewest points to fantasy wide receivers in 2024. On average, to an entire wide receiver core, they're only giving up 14.5 PPR points per game. L'Jarius Sneed, this team traded for him in the offseason. He has turned this defense into a lockdown unit. He is the truth. Let's look at this. The Titans defense against wide receivers this year. In week 1, they faced DJ Moore. DJ Moore had just 10 fantasy points, 36 yards receiving. In week 2, they faced Garrett Wilson. And the great Garrett Wilson only had 57 yards, 10.2 fantasy points. In 2024, guys, check this out. The Titans give up the fewest passing yards per game. The Titans give up the fewest total yards per game to opposing offenses. On average, this team is only giving up 114 passing yards per game. I mean, look, don't yell at me, but you can make a case even if Jordan Love is playing, this might not be a good matchup. But certainly if Malik Willis is going to be the quarterback, guys, Malik Willis only threw the ball 14 times last week. I just don't think you can rely on this at all. He had just 14 attempts. They clearly don't trust him to throw the ball. I mean, Josh Jacobs had 32 rushing attempts, for God's sake. Here's some wide receivers I would rather start over the Packers this week. Rashid Shaheed, Xavier Worthy, Michael Pittman, Tank Dell, Amari Cooper, and Stephon Diggs. Okay, the third name that I'm pretty nervous about this week, I love him, but Aaron Jones really, really worries me versus the Houston Texans this week. The Texans are another vastly improved defense. They give up the 3rd fewest points per game to fantasy running backs. On average, just 12 points per game to the running back position. And week 1, they held Jonathan Taylor to 3 yards per carry. Jonathan Taylor to 3 yards per carry. He only had 10.8 fantasy points. In week 2, they held DeAndre Swift to 1.3 yards per carry. DeAndre Swift had 8 points somehow through the air is where he got those points. And the Texans defense in 2024, let's look at them overall. They give up the 7th fewest rushing yards per game. They give up the 3rd fewest total yards per game. And in yards per attempt, they give up the 9th lowest yards per attempt at 4.0. I mean, look, we also have to consider that we're starting to see Ty Chandler get more and more opportunities in this offense. He's had at least 10 touches in each of the last 2 games. There's just too many concerns for me. I get it if you have to start him, but I would rather play Zamir White, Zach Charbonnet, Zach Moss, Brian Robinson, Tony Pollard, and Rachaad White as well. Okay, the fourth player we just don't want to play. I'll be honest, guys. This is not a good matchup. George Pickens versus the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers have been so good under Jim Harbaugh. I mean, this offense and this defense have completely changed. This defense is so good through 2 weeks. They give up the second fewest points to fantasy wide receivers, just 13.8 points per game to entire wide receiver cores, okay? In week 1, you had Davante Adams, the great Davante Adams, who had just 59 yards, 10.9 fantasy points. In week 2, you had Deontay Johnson completely shut down, just 15 receiving yards. And this Chargers defense, like I said, guys, elite. Passing yards allowed per game, 6th fewest. Total yards allowed per game, 2nd fewest. And total points allowed per game to opposing offenses, the fewest given in the NFL, just 6.5 points per game. You guys think about that for a second? On average, the Chargers defense is not even giving up a full touchdown with an extra point. That is absolutely nutty. And at the moment, the Steelers offense just is not a pass-heavy unit. In fact, through 2 weeks, they are 3rd fewest in passing yards per game, only 121 passing yards per game. As much as I love Pickens, I just think the way that the Steelers play football is really limiting his upside. Great defense, slow-paced, run-focused offense. Justin Fields hasn't thrown for 160 yards in any of his first 2 games, and he's averaging 11 rushing attempts per game. It's just not wide receiver friendly. I would rather start names like Tank Dell, Brian Thomas, Stephon Diggs, Amari Cooper, Michael Pittman, and Jackson Smith and Jigba. All right, the 5th and last name, I genuinely, look, again, I could be wrong, guys, but 70% hit rate so far on these. I don't think anyone should be starting Justin Herbert. I mean, even in Superflex leagues, you might have a better like running back or wide receiver option. Anyway, he plays the Steelers. Pittsburgh gives up the 2nd fewest points to fantasy quarterbacks. Guys, on average, Pittsburgh is only giving up 9 points to quarterbacks. Let's have a look at it real quick. In week 1, the Steelers held Kirk Cousins to just 8 fantasy points, and they had him throw 2 interceptions. Bo Nix in the 2nd week, I get it. You know, he's not a vet, but he had 2 interceptions as well. 10 fantasy points. He only scored points because he had a rushing touchdown. Based on Justin Herbert's current injury, do we really think there'll be much mobility for him? And if you look at the Steelers defense a little bit further in depth, they're 5th in total yards allowed per game and 2nd in total points allowed per game, just like we talked about earlier when we were talking about J.K. Dobbins. Justin Herbert himself has been so mediocre for fantasy football. It is painful to see for fantasy, but so good to see for this team being a good team. Justin Herbert, 10 points in week 1, 12 points in week 2. He has not had a top 20 quarterback finish on any week, and the Chargers offense is extremely run focused. They're 6th in rushing attempts per game, and they have the 4th fewest passing attempts per game through 2 weeks. I would rather start Geno Smith, Sam Darnold, Derek Carr, Baker Mayfield, or Dak Prescott. I really appreciate you guys watching the video. Again, friendly reminder, these are just my opinions. Please make your own decisions. You got to take accountability for, your team as well. If you agree with my rationale, maybe there's an alternate option that you have on your team instead. Be a friend, hit that like button. If you're having a tough time making a start-sit decision, check out the pinned comment. There's a link there to our website where you can ask us a question at any time, and we will reply for you even when we're offline. Thank you so much for watching. Hit the like button, subscribe. And good luck in week 3. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.